Hey everyone, and welcome to Voices of Veritas, a podcast made by the church for the church. I'm Ryan Hennigan.
And I'm Michael Bashaw. At Veritas Community Church, we believe that the gospel of Jesus Christ is at work in and through us, transforming all things.
On Voices of Veritas, you will hear real stories of gospel transformation, spiritual insights, and heartfelt conversations that seek to encourage us as we follow Jesus.
We invite you to join us twice a month to listen, learn, and grow in faith together.
My name is Ryan Hennigan. Welcome to the Voices of Veritas podcast. I am the solo host for this episode. Michael Bashaw, our co-host, is unfortunately not with us. He's out of town, actually, so I'm sure he's having a great time. But so we miss him, and he will be missed here for this episode. But this episode we've been trying to get on the books for a little while now. We tried last year. I'm really, really excited because we have on the podcast today the Refuge, and we're joined with Jordan Fillmore and Matthew Demoulin.
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, great, excellent. I was trying to practice that ahead of time. But yeah, so both of you are Veritas members. You attend West, is that correct?
Yes.
Veritas West. Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. And you guys are with the Refuge, and I've heard that kind of organization, that name thrown around in members meetings or by some of the elders, but I'm not super familiar with what it is or how it got started, and I'd love to just kind of hear your guys' involvement with it. And Jordan, maybe we can start with you. Can you give me just like an elevator pitch for what the Refuge is?
So the Refuge is a nonprofit organization it's been around since 1999. Started by our founder Tom Thompson, and it was really just a place for men struggling with addiction. Been a lot of changes over the years and what it looks like, but the base of it, our goal is to really help men transform their lives, coming out of addiction through Christ.
Okay.
It's a long-term residential recovery program, so it's broken up into different phases and things like that. But it's really a safe place for guys that are struggling to come into and find rest, and also find themselves, find God.
So it's specifically for men only?
Yes. Yeah. We started a women's program a few years back. They ended up breaking off. They do their own thing now. They're down in Circleville. It's called The Covering. A lot of the same women that were staff when it was under the Refuge are still there. And we still refer people to each other. So
That's awesome.
A good relationship.
That's great. And you said you're a nonprofit, but you're helping men transform their lives away from addiction through the gospel. So does that mean the Refuge is specifically like Christian nonprofit, or is it kind of just embedded into your overall organization?
We advertise ourselves as a faith-based organization.
Okay.
Christ is at the center of what we do, but we do have other aspects of programming and services that we provide that are more clinical, more practical.
Sure.
Just in holistically helping a person.
And you said it's addiction recovery. Is there a specific type of addiction or just any kind of addiction?
Substance use disorder.
Okay.
So any type of substance that you could find yourself addicted to.
Okay. Matthew, anything to add to the Refuge or its mission or vision or kind of how it got started?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Jordan said, is historically we've always been 13 months. And here recently, we dropped the 13th months. I think one of the things with being an organization that's been around for so long, you can fall into tradition, like, well, this is just how we've always done it, and it's always worked. But here recently, we've thought about, okay, like, what is the 13th month? And so we've dropped that to individualize it. And so, for example, it may take Jordan 11 months, but it might take me 15 months. And so what we've realized over the past couple of years is some men are ready to go before that 13th month. And then there were some men that were about to complete that we were essentially nervous about. So we're no longer a 13th month, but we're still very much long-term. and Jordan touched on it a little bit. We can talk about this a little later on, but whether it's 11 months or it's 15 months, it's divided in 4 phases. And each phase has an objective that we try to focus on. And then each phase has a level of autonomy and privileges that builds on each other from phase to phase. But yeah, we're very much a faith-based, Christian-centered addiction recovery program.
Can you maybe, I'd love to get into the details on this, like the 4 phases. I'd love to hear that. But also, as you mentioned, you kind of individualize it to the person. So can you maybe just walk me through the process? I mean, let's say that I'm somebody who struggles with substance use disorder. I hear about the Refuge, someone refers me, or however I hear about it. I come in the doors. What's the process like?
First step would to be calling our intake team. And so when you have that information, what's beautiful about us is most of our staff are actually Refuge alumni. So that means they've actually went through the program, completed the program, and now have gotten certain professional development, certain, criteria and certificates. And so that's what makes us really unique is not only does our staff have a lot of lived experience, but it's like a double lived experience, like the lived experience plus going through the Refuge. And even just we're in the process of trying to become accredited as a peer-run organization, which means 51% majority of our executive leadership team has to be a peer, so either substance use or mental health. And what's cool is 4 of our six executive team members are peers, and 3 of us have actually gone through the Refuge, myself included, Jordan, who's our CFO, and then Todd, who is our director of housing. And so call the intake line, our intake manager, as well as sometimes it might just be someone on our intake team, but everyone involved in intake is a graduate of the Refuge. So you call that and, you can ask questions and learn about our program. Obviously, there's a lot of anxieties. There's a lot of wants. Hey, can I do this? Can I not do this? What does it look like? And so they'll walk you through the process, answer questions. And then there is an assessment just to see, is this a good fit for you? We do help with mental health, but we're substance use primary and mental health secondary. So depending on some of the assessment, as well as, talking to our clinical director, it may be decided that, there's another place as far as a higher level of care from a mental health aspect versus us. So that's the first step is just talking to our intake team, assessing, and then if everything looks good, is the actual intake process and bringing you in.
Okay. Jordan, how long have you been with the Refuge? What's your experience been like?
December 18th, 2017. That is the day that I came in.
Okay.
I came in struggling with an opiate and methamphetamine addiction for years. And so had a family member tell me about the place and was just really looking to find somewhere to go. So I came into the program and then at that time we were still a 13-month program. So I finished. I came on staff as a coordinator. They're kind of like our on-site managers of our properties. They're all men that have gone through, and they really help with logistics and making sure guys are getting where they need to go and things like that. So I did that for a few months, and then Ben Reynolds, who was our former CFO, he's now our COO, had been looking to hire somebody, and so he found out a little bit about my background, and we started to have conversations, and he got to know me a little bit, and then decided to offer me an entry-level administrative position. I was checking mail and following up on any errands that he might send me on. So that was March of 2019, and I've been on staff since. The job responsibilities and everything have changed over the years, but yeah,
That's
loving
awesome.
every minute of it.
Matthew, how long have you been involved with the Refuge?
Yeah, so I came in at the Refuge on September 11th in 2017. A little different story than Jordan. I had no idea what the Refuge was, and thought I was being driven to a rehab, and we pulled up to Veritas West, and I remember looking at the guy that brought me and looking at the church and thinking, well, what is this? And so similar to Jordan, completed. And then I also worked as a coordinator, and me and Jordan actually worked together. And then he got hired after I did the coordinating step, because back then a coordinator could only do a 6-month term at a time, and you could only do 2 terms consecutively. Then after a year, it was like, okay, now it's time for launching, like all the men.
Yeah.
I went to Franklin County Public Health, and I was there for 4.5 years, serving in I had 3 different positions there. But what was cool was my main objective there was really addiction, helping people in the community with addiction, working on addiction campaigns, grants that were funded because of the opiate epidemic. And then in 2023 in January is when I came back to the Refuge as the Columbus director.
That's awesome. So do you guys have like in chapters or like different locations, or are you just in Columbus?
Yeah, good question. Historically, we've had a couple different sites. I would say over the last 10 years, there's 2 places where phase 1 always started in Lancaster. And so we have a 138-acre property out there. So phase 1 and phase 2 is in Lancaster, and then the back half of the ministry is located in Columbus.
Okay, perfect. So earlier you mentioned there are 4 phases when somebody goes into this residential treatment. Are you using the right terminology there? Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you maybe explain the phases, Jordan, and tell me like how you get from one to the other?
Yeah, so our phase 1 is called our discovery phase. It's a month-long, basically, blackout period. There's no communication to friends, family. You're pretty limited on your travel and what you can go do. But the idea is to discover God and discover yourself. And for a lot of guys, I mean, it's really just getting a good meal, getting some good sleep, starting to build just some good routines and schedule. And after the 30 days, then you go to our phase 2, which is called our relational phase. And this is where we start to really press into familial relationships. So we start hosting family days. They start getting phone calls and really building relationships with the guys that they're going through within that program. Some of those relationships can be long lasting. I mean, Matthew and I are here together, and we've been very close friends since really working together in the program. And there's a couple other guys that I'm still really close friends with that we went through together. So really building on the relational aspects, because a lot of these guys are coming in with broken relationships with family, with friends, wives, children. And so that's really a place for them to start to rebuild a lot of those. Our phase 3 is called our application phase. This is when guys get employment and start to rebuild the routines of going to work, coming home, and they're still getting a lot of the services that we provide, but getting in that routine, getting back to normal society. And then our 4th phase is our launch phase. So this is where guys are really hammering down on what am I going to need when I leave this place. You're going to need housing, transportation, kind of a plan of where am I going to be invested in community-wise, church-wise, having some accountability, getting a lot of those things kind of set in place before they do end up launching out. And then we do have, it's called Project 614. It's our sober living. One of the things that this was realized well before my time, but when guys would complete and they had nowhere to go, and it's hard to get housing when you don't have, maybe some guys have some evictions on their record or just don't have good credit or anything like that. So one of the things that we realized was, okay, we got to have a safe place for these guys to land. And so we own a couple duplexes on the west side. It's low cost rent, and it's really a place for them to go to continue doing what they've been doing, working and building up, their finances and, buying a car and really get in a better place for them financially, so that, down the road, 6 months, a year, 2 years, couple years, whatever, they're ready to go out and get their own place.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you really hit on the relational aspect, I would say, in all the phases, honestly. Is there like a sponsor? Does the guys who go through this program have like a mentor, or is it kind of just the whole organization itself is coming around somebody and helping them in these 4 phases.
Yes and yes. The mentor part's not until further along, but the emphasis is community, and even just deeper than community is really just he touched on it. Like our phase 2 is called this relational restoration, and if you want to say like what's the crux of what the refuge is the idea of repairing that relational unity. And so in Matthew 22, when, the expert of the law goes to test Jesus and says, teacher, what's the greatest commandment of the law? And we all know what Jesus says: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so when you think about love of God, love of others, love of self, what addiction does, especially drug and alcohol addiction, is it fragments those 3 things. And Jordan touched on broken relationships. And so the fragmentation of those 3 things are often the precursor to addiction. And so what we believe is if you fix those 3 things through discipleship and community, and you have a healthy relationship with God and others and yourself, essentially that's the cure to addiction. And so that's really the focus point of everything we do in our discipleship ministry is those 3 things and bringing that relational unity back to that. And so a lot of that, there are volunteers throughout the ministry. We have this idea of like guys that are further along in the ministry serving the guys that are, just beginning. But then we also have curriculum further on in the ministry where there's men that have been volunteers, and these are men that have been walking out the Christian life for decades, and men that have only been walking it out for 5 years. There are also men that could be very successful in business. So this kind of like overarching, we call it coaches. Yeah. So it's these men meet with the guys, and they just essentially every week, and they just talk about the Bible, but also talk about, what are you dealing with? So let me use my experience to help you.
So they meet weekly. I love that.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit of the discipleship and ministry. Can you walk me through how you incorporate the gospel, how you incorporate faith into addiction recovery?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was said earlier, we believe the only way out of addiction is through freedom in Christ. And so operating from that, core belief, we really start to build on, and this happens throughout the entirety of the program. It's, we'll have praise and worships once a week. We'll have Bible studies where we have some volunteers that come in and teach certain topics. We have our own, we call them community groups and discipleship assignments where the guys get together and get to learn about each other and also learn about their relationship with Christ and how it's impacting them as they go through. We're partnered with Veritas West and very much wanting to have the guys get expository preaching and what that looks like and hearing the word, hearing preaching coming straight from the word. And Matthew could probably speak on this a lot better than I could, as he was more ingrained in the residential aspect. But it's really just it's just sprinkled throughout the entirety of what we do. In the last few years, we've entered into getting accredited with Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, and having some clinicians come in and really give tools, but at the same time still having the gospel included in those services that we provide in the group therapies and individual counselings, to really bolster what we believe to be true. We see the secular side of what people are doing in the addiction field, and some of it is, really helpful. And so tying that in with what we believe spiritually, and just really bolstering a lot of those thoughts. Yeah.
So being a faith-based organization with the gospel just ingrained in everything you do you find that a lot of the men who come through your doors already kind of have a background in faith, or is it not really that evident?
I would say most at least are open to it because they hear about it up front. They hear that we are a faith-based organization, that we believe that transformation comes through Christ. And, if a guy is totally against that, he's more than likely not going to choose to come to us.
Sure.
But like for my sake, like I was raised, I would say, in a Christian setting, but I didn't necessarily believe, I didn't follow, that's for sure. And I always felt like is this really the path forward for me to get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And I was willing to, because I'd been raised around it, and I'd seen so many people that went to church and read their Bibles and were genuinely happy with their lives. And so I was just like, okay, I'm willing to try this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably where most guys are at,
Mm.
is they're at least open to it.
Sure. You guys are, I mean, just a unique position, right? Having gone through the refuge as individuals and now working for it. And I'd love to just kind of hear a little bit about your testimony, if you're willing to share. You are obviously not alone in these stories, but everybody's testimony is unique. And so I'd love to just kind of hear a little bit about what the process was like for you as a person going through those 4 steps. Or, Jordan, you mentioned that at the time you were going, they were still on a 13-week kind of program. So I'd love to hear kind of how that goes.
So I mentioned I came in on September 11th, 2017. Prior to that, I suffered for almost 10 years with an opiate epidemic or addiction. My story started longer, like I was in my mid-20s, but what I meant by my story started like a lot of people in the early 2000s, is we all know about the pill epidemic and the oxys, and everyone I knew was using them. And now that we know the story, what was told from the top, like, oh, here's this new pain treatment that's non-addictive. That led to, almost like 8 years of heroin. Throughout that addiction, I never sought treatment. I would just cold turkey it. I would say every 6 to 8 months, I would just kind of look at myself in the mirror and be like, dude, what are you doing? Cold turkey, just deal with being dope sick for a week or so. I would usually take a week off of work. And the first time, I got like 6 or 7 months clean, and then I relapsed, and, then it was like 5 months or 6 months. And the lie I told myself was, you did it. If you just don't do this next time, you're good. And that just spiraled over 10 years. And so I eventually, what my motivation to get clean was, I started witnessing a lot of people overdosing. I had friends that died. I can't tell you how many times I had to pump someone's chest because they were overdosing. And eventually, I was just like, you're going to die. You get to a point where you look yourself in the mirror and you can't recognize yourself. I remember I used to get ready in the dark. If there was nobody around, I would get ready in the dark, just because I didn't want to look at myself. And so shave, brush my teeth. And so I realized I was going to die. But it wasn't necessarily that. It was like, okay, death sucks, but to die hating yourself and hating your life, like, what's worse than that? And I remember it was like 3:00 in the morning on a Wednesday. And I just remember thinking, man, if like you just had like this pain and you went to the doctors and they're like, yeah, you're going to die in 3 months. Like, I would cry like a coward.
Yeah.
And beg for a chance to live my life over again. And I was just like, that's not the way I want to go out. Hating myself and hating my life. And so that was my motivation. The irony was my family tried to get me to come to the refuge like maybe 3 years before. And you want to talk about like a providence of God thing. And so the man that brought me to the refuge was my brother-in-law's father. And so my sister met Justin. Justin's father, Jerry, has been a pastor in London for 43 years. He just like retired a couple of years ago, but he met Tom Thompson right when he founded the refuge. And then Jerry would send men to the refuge. So, and they got married well before I started using drugs. And so this was already like in the works well before I even had a problem. So they tried to get me to come into the refuge. And I remember just talking to somebody on the phone, not even remember it was called a refuge. And it's being like, heard something about a farm, it's really long. And I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to lose my job. I'm just going to do what I always do. So after having that thought Wednesday morning, I texted my sister and was just like, yeah, I'm done. Can you call Jerry and see if you can get me to that place? And she called me back that morning and was just like, yeah, pack a big bag and he'll pick you up Monday. And this was early Wednesday morning. And the crazy thing is, I didn't ask any questions. I didn't say, what's it called? Or what can you do? Or what can you not do? Or how long is it? And that's more of a God thing. Because again, if I would have looked it up and saw 13 months, and I probably would have went. So as I mentioned, Jerry picks me up and he brings me to Veritas West Church. And I'm thinking, what the heck is this? And so back then they used to do an orientation every Monday. So I'm sitting through this orientation, discipleship ministry. Don't really have any problem against that, but like, that's not what I was looking. And I was just like, God's not really what I'm looking for, but I didn't have any options. At this point, I was pretty much homeless. I was sleeping in my car or wherever I could find. And I was just like, I'm not doing 13 months. I was like, I knew I needed it sometime, but I was like, in my mind, I was like 4 months and you're out. So I remember just kind of like trying to fake some enthusiasm about excited to come into this ministry. And I got accepted. And back then, first phase was in Vinton County. And if you didn't know anything about Vinton County, it's the least populated county in the middle of freaking nowhere. And so the whole time you're at church in this orientation, there's just so much Jesus talk. And then you just start driving on this bus for 2 hours. And then like street signs disappear. And it's just like you're turning on roads and you're thinking, what the heck? And then there's this farmhouse literally in the middle of nowhere. And you're thinking, if there ever was a cult, farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, all this Jesus talk, and a bunch of dudes that seem really freaking happy, and you're just like, what is this place? I like to say that I met Jesus Christ in a bathroom stall. The reason why is, you know, by the time I got to Vinton County, and back then everybody just detoxed there, you know, I started, you know, going through opiate withdrawal and, you know, puking. And, you know, I go into upstairs was the bathroom and there was like 2 urinals and like 2 stalls. And I run into the stall and I'm puking. And I look in the back of the door and there's a Bible verse called John 15:5, you know, and we've all heard that. I've read that, but like, I've never paid attention to the last sentence in that where it says, apart from me, or some versions say, apart from God, you can do nothing. And I remember scoffing at that and just being like, done plenty of things without you. And here I am throwing up because I'm addicted to opiates and pridefully being like, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. And so the irony is over those first 3 days or so, when you really are having physical symptoms, puking and other things going on, I was always in that stall and I would just repeat that. I would vomit, turn around and stare at John 15:5. Puke, just turn around, stare at John 15:5. And then after that kind of started to regress, you know, every time I had to use the bathroom, there was only one stall that was usually unoccupied. And of course it was that stall. And so I became like transfixed with that verse, to where even when I was in class, I would just be thinking about it and thinking, almost haunted by it. And then eventually, as you know, the weeks moved on to those first 30 days, I would just eventually I was locking myself in this stall and just reading it over and over and over. And it started to make sense, not theological sense, but at least practical sense, where I was like, okay, you didn't birth yourself, you know, you didn't give yourself abilities or talents or any of those things. And so really, what can you claim on your own accord? And then all of a sudden, just one day, it just made sense theologically. Like I said, I grew up Catholic and my whole life, as far as that, you know, Matthew 22 that I referenced, I was just like, it always bothered me. I was just like, who can actually love the Lord their God with all their heart? Like, it bothered me. I was like, who does this? Nobody can do this, you know? And eventually, as I grew up, I was like, I just thought it was rhetoric. Like, we all just say this, but no one does it. But I never really understood that, like, my anger and my frustration with who can do this was actually theologically based, because nobody can do it. And then all of a sudden, you know, in that bathroom stall, I was just like, one day it just made sense. It's just like the grace of God.
That was amazing. I gotta be honest, and I'm not trying to blow smoke or anything, but yeah, I mean, I've known several people who have struggled with addiction and all different types of addictions. And obviously it was the Holy Spirit working in you, but also your determination to read that verse over and over again, your determination to really wrestle with it. I know that, you know, it's the Spirit, it's God that changes the heart, but you had to let him in, you know, you had to wrestle with that yourself. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Jordan, how about you? Can you share a little bit about your testimony and experience with the Refuge personally?
I had some things happen when I was around 12, 13 years old. My parents went through a really messy divorce. And this was kind of one of the catalysts for leading me down the path that I was on. And in the midst of that, I took on kind of a fatherly role for my sister. You know, she was 5 years younger than I was, and she didn't understand what was going on. And quite frankly, I was not in a position really, but I cared about her, and my parents were too concerned with each other and the issues that they were dealing with. And so I took on this role that I was not prepared for, but felt obligated to be in. and just felt a weight from that, and it continued to build and grow, and found out other things about, what my parents were doing, and found out that they struggled with substance use, and really kind of opened up my thoughts of like, well, maybe I could do some of this. And I had friends that did it, they smoked weed and they drank. And I remember, trying those things, and it just lifted that weight that I was carrying around. And so it started off very casual, but continued to progress because I wanted to disassociate. I wanted to lighten the burden that I was feeling. And that was the only avenue that I was finding it, really. And it, over time, you hang around that crowd long enough, you start getting introduced to different things. And like Matthew, I started getting introduced to pain medications, Vicodin and Percocet, and that's what really kind of started it for me. And this was, I'm 15, 16, 17. I'd always done well in school, and I thought that I was hiding it very well, and to a degree I did, because I did so well in school and in sports. Like, people didn't really question me too much. I ended up going to college, and by the grace of God, I got my degree in math education. But as I'm going through college, my usage is getting worse and worse and worse. You build up a tolerance, and it just leads you down that path to do more and more and more, so that you don't feel sick, And so I got introduced to heroin when I was 22. And it was one of those things, like, I told myself, I'm never going to be a heroin user. I'm never going to do that. Right. But when you're dope sick for days and you can't afford the pain pills, and someone offers you something for $10 that's way stronger, and you've been sick and throwing up, like Matthew was talking about, in those moments of weakness, in that moment of weakness, I gave in. And that just spiraled for the next 6 years. It's funny, as I'm hearing Matthew's story and I'm hearing the same things in mine. I remember looking in a mirror at one point and not recognizing myself. I was just really ashamed. But it wasn't enough to make me seek treatment either. I thought I could just figure it out on my own, because I'd been doing so many things on my own for so long. I'm smart enough. I can figure this out. I'm strong enough. But I wasn't, thankfully. I got to a place. It's a weird thing about Wednesdays, man. I had a Wednesday. The Wednesday before I came into the refuge, I overdosed. And I came out of it, and I was scared. I was confused. But what really kind of freaked me out was, it was like I was very apathetic to almost dying. And that really, as I was processing it and thinking through it, I'm like, man, that's scary, that I could have just died and I don't know how I feel about it. It was the middle of winter. I had an apartment. I was getting evicted from it. My car was broke down. I had a family member, my aunt. She had been looking for me, trying to catch me and just talk to me. And she caught me one time when I was at home, and was just like, "Are you done with this? Are you ready to change? Are you ready to get out of this?" And at that point, she caught me at the right time. I was in desperation. I was at my lowest. So she's like, "Well, I want to take you to this place. I want you to talk to some people who know about the place I want you to go to." And one of them actually was a guy that I went to school with. He was a year younger than I was, but we had used together in the past, and knew a lot of the same people. And she's like, "I want you to talk to him. He's going to be here. He works at the refuge. He's a coordinator." And so I met with him on Sunday morning, and I remember he just looked like a totally different person. From the person that I had last seen him as, and this is, I don't know, 5-6 years since I'd seen him. It was like he was just glowing to me. And I'm like, what? Who are you?
Mm.
And so I made the decision. I was like, okay, I'll go check it out. I don't have any other options as it is anyway. So similar, yeah, I came to the church, took the long bus ride down to Vinton County. You get off the bus and you got all these guys waiting for you. Like, they're outside, they're clapping, they're cheering, and they give you hugs and they tell you they love you, and you're like, this is weird.
Yeah.
I don't even know you, man. Like, what do you mean you love me? But that was very intentional. It was meant to just open you up to the reckless love that God has for us.
Yeah.
And you don't understand it. You don't get it. But over time, you start to really appreciate it. And I was sick as well for that first week. I wasn't as bad as I think Matthew was. But at the time when I came in, we only had intakes on Monday. I came in the week before Christmas. They didn't have intakes for the next 2 weeks because it fell on Christmas and New Year's. And the providence of God bringing me in on the day that he did, I am certain I would not have made it another 2 weeks. The state that I was in, I was a mess. Me getting to the refuge and just feeling so desperate for something different, I was willing. I was open. I wasn't necessarily open to staying the whole time, like Matthew said for himself, but I'd lived a life that I was not proud of for a long time. And we had a praise and worship service that Thursday. And that was probably the night before was the first night I actually got any sleep. So I felt a little better the next day when I woke up, and I'm starting to clear some of the cobwebs. And we had a praise and worship service, and it was really the first moment where I felt like God really did love me, that he cared about me, that he didn't care about all of the carnage that I had left behind. It's weird. I was sold out from that moment. I'm grateful for God's timing and bringing me there, and just the willingness to press in. And yeah, a new man today.
Well, as you've been saying since we started, right? It's the gospel that can transform you, right? That's the only thing that can do that. So, yeah, I'm really glad you're with us. I'm really glad that God met you there and his love became real to you, and such a special testimony. I just appreciate that. So, both of you can you tell me kind of now the flip side of after you've gone through the program? I mean, obviously, Jordan, you're CFO. Matthew, I don't think I officially got your title. I'm sorry if you said it already, but
No, I haven't. I'm the Chief Development Officer. And so formerly I was the residential director, and then just here at the beginning of this year, I've switched to this position. And so as a residential director, I used to oversee both Columbus and Lancaster as far as the residential team and aspects. And now I'm into development.
That's so great. So obviously both of you work for the Refuge, but just again, more kind of personal testimony side, like you're still in recovery, or so how do you view that? I guess I've heard people from different recovery groups kind of say, once an addict, always an addict, but like I'm in recovery. Is that kind of how you guys view it for yourselves, or how's that go?
Well, I would say it this way. Because I tried AA, and I think there are a lot of things that are really good about it. It was started by Christian men, and there's a lot of aspects that I think are really good for someone that's in recovery. I always had a problem with calling myself an addict, and I think I still do to this day. Do I think that someone could put heroin in front of me and I could say no to it? Yes. But the devil doesn't work that way. He waits till you're at your weakest moment, and sin starts, we talk about it in the program, sin starts kind of as a snowball effect. It starts off really small, and it builds and it builds and grows. And then before you know it, like something really bad happens. I probably am a little different. I don't know if I am answering your question well, but if I was to go to an AA meeting and introduce myself, like it would be, hi, my name's Jordan Fillmore and I'm a child of God. Like, I really do feel like I'm set free from that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not necessarily sinless, and I know that.
Sure.
But I do feel like God has restored me in a manner that I'm not my former self.
Yeah.
As far as kind of where I'm at now, so when I completed and I came on staff, I felt God wanting me to stay at Veritas West. That's where the Refuge has been partnered with for quite a few years now. And I wanted to be a witness to the guys that were going through. I really wanted to be someone that they could look to and be an image of hope for them, to be someone that they could see, like, I can do that too. Because I had guys that had completed that still stayed around, and that was really encouraging for me to see that. And so I wanted to do that for someone else. And so I stayed. I invested in our church. I invested in my role in what I was doing at the Refuge, and God really has just blessed me tremendously.
What faith-based treatment centers do is they say you don't have to identify as an addict the rest of your life, that in fact you are a new creation and your past doesn't define you. And that's so monumental for, the addict, because of really the labeling, the stigma, and everything that they've gone through, to where when they enter treatment, like, they're so downtrodden. And so for me, a monumental point was Tom Thompson, was our founder, basically saying that. And there's things that we do to build upon that. Like, every day the men wake up, for morning radio, and they do what's called affirmations, or affirmations in Christ. And there's all these Bible verses that is in the Bible that a man looks to the guy to his right or left? I can't remember. To his right, and tells, like, you are the light of the world. And then the next guy will say, you're not the tail, you're the head, all these things. And there's a list of, and so it's like we start doing that. And so coming to the Refuge and learning that you can be a new creation, you can be restored and redeemed, and you can go from addict to sonship. Like, that was monumental. And so I think for me, it's like, I don't identify as an addict. I will say that I'm recovered, but, even to Jordan's point, it's like, I know I still have the potential to go right back to that, because it's like the flesh doesn't ever go anywhere. We want to pretend like somehow we've conquered it, but, like, I know if, and one of my fears is, like, I get in this crazy accident and, like, I got to be on pain medicines. Like, I have the potential to go right back, but I don't identify that part of me, because that part of me is gone. It could still come back, but I feel like there's something very handcuffed about walking around and being like, I'm an addict, even when you are in recovery.
Again, in both of your stories, I'm hearing just faithfulness, right? Like, the Spirit is leading you guys, and you guys are responding in faithfulness, and all the glory is going to God, and the testimonies that you guys have are really testimonies of His power being able to transform people. I mean, it's truly been, again, I'm not trying to, inflate your egos or anything, but this has been one of the best discussions. It's been truly a privilege just to get to hear and see your guys' stories. It brings a lot of hope, and it brings just, again, a lot of glory to God, because it's easy to, what you said earlier, Matthew, about the rhetoric of Scripture, right? It's like, it's easy to say, oh yeah, you're a new creation and you're new, but then to meet people who have been made new by the gospel, by the Spirit.
Yes.
You overcome by the power of the word and your testimony, right? And so your guys' testimony is huge part to that. So that's been amazing, and I've really enjoyed our time. As we were actually preparing, Matthew, when you mentioned a minute ago about you starting the mornings with the radio show of affirmations, you said that Refuge has a podcast. Is that right?
Yeah, it's called Relational Recovery. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Where can people listen to that?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, therefugeohio.org, www.therefugeohio.org, I know on that first page, I believe, that comes up, you scroll all the way to the bottom, I think there's an ability to subscribe to that. I think you can subscribe through Apple Podcast.
Anywhere you
Yeah.
get your podcast from, it's on there. You search Relational Recovery.
Perfect. Honestly, I really want I want our listeners to just sit with your guys' testimonies. I want to sit with it. I want to just listen and take that all in and let those speak for themselves. I typically, this is why Michael, our co-host, is really good as a co-host, is because I get pretty enamored with details, like the black and whites of how does it work and what are the pragmatics and logistics, and he's more of the relational side, and so I'm trying to fill both shoes today. But I really want people to just sit with the relationality of your guys' story and how God has changed you and how you are continuously being faithful and helping change others. Well, that'll do it for us today on the Voices of Veritas podcast. Thanks, guys, and tune in next time.